and visible as well? Should I go ahead?
Yes,
This
sir.
is,
Yes,
this
sir.
is,
Audible and visible.
Yes, sir.
this is visible, yes. Okay. Uh,
So if you wish, you may begin. Shumanta sir, should I reintroduce sir?
Yes, sir. I think you have done it. So you can give a short introduction, if possible.
Okay, okay. I shall repeat the entire thing so that the sir feels very welcome. Sir, I shall. We welcome you. We welcome you to our session. So let me just introduce you once again. We are really honored to have you today as our speaker for this session. Professor Amitabh Sharkar is the former director of Indian Institute of Social Welfare and Business Management. He is also former professor and visiting scientist at Indian Statistical Institute. He is the former professor and director at School of Management and Science and vice chancellor of West Bengal University of Technology. He has been associated with research and academic administration for over 40 years at various universities and academic institutions in India, US, Europe. Some of his notable work encompassed projects for various institutions, including the Planning Commission of India, University Grants Commission, Government of West Bengal, and World Bank. Professor Dr. Amitabh Sharkar has been invited to present his research at various national and international conferences, including World Institute for Development Economics Research, WIDER, United Nations University at Helsinki, University of Foggia, Italy, St. Petersburg, Russia, and Oxford. On behalf of our institution, I would like to welcome you, Professor Dr. Amitabh Sharkar, to enlighten and guide us with your invaluable knowledge and experience at this session today. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Chakraborty. Before I start, I appreciate your inviting me to deliver this talk at your 5-day seminar. Dr. Chakraborty and my fellow colleagues, and of course my participants. Well, you have been hearing, I'm sure, different talks, different presentations, different ideas on how to write a good research paper. It's indeed a very difficult task. But I think what we must ensure before we start writing a paper is to ensure that it adds value addition. That's the key word. It should add value addition. There should be something new. Doesn't mean that it's earth-shaking, okay? But something which either will push the boundary of knowledge out a little bit, or maybe retest or re-examine some of the relationships or the theories, the formulations that we already are familiar with. That's the most important thing. The concepts and the issues are very, very important, and we have to make them measurable, observable, testable, and things like that. So some of the characteristics of it, which indeed would ensure that this is done, okay, that our research is indeed non-trivial. It adds some value. We need to go over this. The concepts, the requirements, the characteristics that we're talking about, some of these things will be, you already know, but we try to put them in order so you know what exactly you should do, you should ensure before you conduct a particular research on any aspect or any topic. All right, next. So today what we'll be doing is we'll be addressing one part of it, right, which is formulating and negotiating research programs. That's what we would like to do. Now, what is research? As a matter of fact, we conduct research in order to answer questions. Right? We have questions, we have issues that we encounter in any profession or in our daily life, in any political or economic discourse and things like that. So we search for, we probe, okay? Or we hunt for ways of answering these questions. There's numerous ways of answering the question. One is just hunch, one is just guess. Okay? One way, and that we are going to talk about, is research. Okay? One way is research. I'm not going to define research. I'm sure you're all familiar with what is research. Okay? It's some kind of an informed investigation, some kind of an investigation which follows certain norms. These are the norms, of course, we are going to discuss. Okay? But all the norms that we will be discussing today would, I hope, show that this research adds some value. This research is non-trivial. And in order to do that, you have to ensure that some of the things, okay, are taken care of well before you start conducting this particular research. So there are certain characteristics or features that we require of any particular research, okay, which we may define as a formal research process. So before we talk about these different characteristics, let's very quickly look at the research process and the research journey. Next, the research journey. What is the research journey? Remember, the basic logic of scientific methodology is almost the same in all fields, in all domains of knowledge. But the specific techniques and approaches will vary depending upon the subject matter. So that's a common thing. That's a common thing. Right? What is it? Given this, what is the research process? What is the research journey? What does it comprise? There are three particular stages, and you can divide it into a number of stages, number of phases, but basically they all boil down to three. First stage is deciding what we want to research on. What is the thing that we're going to investigate? So this is what is formulating research model, and we're talking about it. Okay. Second stage is planning. How do we plan? And that includes conceptualizing a research design. We'll be talking about this as well. Okay. Constructing an instrument for data collection, selecting a sample, writing a research proposal. That's stage 2. And stage 3 is actually performing, doing this research, collecting data, processing data, writing a research report. Okay. That's stage 3. What we'll be doing today is we touch upon a stage 1 and a part of stage 2, conceptualization and things like that. Obviously, we cannot do all of stage 3 or certainly not stage 3. Next. That's the research problem. Let's say, I mean, very simply, let's suppose that you want to conduct a study in the area of alcoholism. Okay? That's something that bothers you, that you would like to carry out some research. And informal, so that's your problem. Okay? So what you do, you have identified basic problem, alcoholism. What you do next, you dissect this particular problem in different areas. Okay? So it could be profile of the alcoholics. I'm going to find out, I'm going to investigate the profile of alcoholics, the causes of alcoholism, the process of becoming an alcoholic, the effects of alcoholism on the family, community attitudes to alcoholism, effectiveness of treatment method, so on and so forth. There will be very many areas. Now you think about it and find out an area that interests you most. Let's say this is, you have selected number 3, effects of alcoholism on the family. Effects of alcoholism on the family. You have selected that from the areas that you have dissected. Right? So you go into step 4 where you raise questions. Some of the questions might be, remember, this is not the exhaustive list. Some of the questions might be, what impact has alcoholism on, let's say, marital relations? How does it affect the various aspects of children's lives? What are the effects on the family's finances? So let's say we raise these 3 questions. There could be a number of other questions, but these are the questions that we would like to research. Step 4, so what do you do now? Turn this into objectives. Right? I mean, from questions into objectives. So your objective is to find out the effects of alcoholism in the family. So step 4, these are in the questions form. Now you formulate the objective. So you do it in the form of ascertain, okay? To find out, to ascertain the impact of alcoholism on marital relations, to determine the ways in which alcoholism affects the different aspects of children's lives, to find out the effects of alcoholism on the financial situations of the family, etc. So from the questions, you turn it into objectives in the form of to ascertain, to determine, to find out things like that. In steps 6, you make sure that you have the necessary wherewithal, necessary resources. That is, assess these objectives in the light of the quantum of work involved, the time available to you, the financial resources at your disposal, and of course, the technical expertise that you have or your supervisor may have in this particular area. And before you start, of course, double check all of this, that you agree, that you are really interested in this particular study, that you agree with the objectives, that you have adequate resources, and that you have the technical experience to undertake this particular study. This is how you formulate a particular research area. So basic interest, dissect into different areas, select one that interests you most, ask some questions, and then turn it into specific objectives. Make sure that you have the necessary wherewithal, and go on. So that's the next. That's usually how you formulate a research problem. Next. Okay. Now, once you have done that, we have to make sure that your research now fulfills some of the requirements, the technical requirements. When I would say all of the technical requirements, your research needs to be appropriate. What do we mean by that? It means that your research should and must focus on the objectives, that it should provide answers to your question. So it has to be appropriate, right? So your research should focus on the questions and the answers. If it doesn't provide the answers, then of course the research is not appropriate. Okay? You're doing something else. Okay? Your research needs to be adequate. That is, the scope and the reach of research must encompass whatever measures and means necessary to pursue and complete the process of inquiry. So whatever measures and means, and that is why the wherewithal, the resources, actual resources is very, very important. But there are other certain technical requirements as well we need to be fulfilled. Remember, research is usually carried out within a framework of a set of paradigms. There are different kinds of paradigms. What's a paradigm? Paradigm is obviously a set of commonly held beliefs and assumptions within a research side, physics community, chemistry community, management community, whatever, about different kinds of ontological, epistemological, and methodological concern. I'm coming to that in a minute. So that's the research paradigm. What are different kinds of paradigms? Usually we see positivist or scientific paradigm. We see naturalistic. We see a different kind of domain-specific, such as ethnography. What's the positive or scientific paradigm? Here, the researcher just sees himself or herself as a neutral recorder. He's a neutral recorder. The positivist paradigm of exploring your social realistic situation is based on the idea that one can best gain an understanding of human behavior through observational reasoning. Differently, only objective, observable facts can be the basis for any scientific paradigm. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
So in a positivist scientific, okay, I'm going to answer the question, why do we need to worry about paradigm in a minute, okay? So the positive in scientific paradigm, you just look at the observable facts, okay? Observable facts. In a naturalistic phenomena, or the naturalistic paradigm, it focuses on understanding of what has happened in a specific circumstance, but rather than trying to predict what will happen next. The naturalistic paradigm or naturalism makes specific claims about epistemology. What do you mean by epistemology? How one comes to know. This is a situation. How have you come to know about this particular situation? Ontology, the nature of this particular situation. For example, human existence and the nature of human existence, and of course axiology. Your values, prevailing values, which will influence the naturalistic inquiry. And finally, the domain-specific, there could be domain-specific paradigms, such as ethnographic, and in social sciences, this is a very important paradigm, as a matter of fact. Ethnographic research, as the name says, is an interest in culture and cultural meanings, with an emphasis on the emic or the insider view. Ethnographies are based on fieldwork among the people whose culture is understood. So ethnographic methods are a research approach where you look at people, okay, in their cultural setting with the goal of producing a narrative account of their particular culture against a certain theoretical framework. Okay. That remember, the primary purpose of ethnography is to gain a holistic understanding of a social or a cultural group. Now, next please. Yeah. Uh, how do we or why do we worry about a research paradigm, or how do you select a research paradigm? My answer would be don't worry about it. But you should know what it is, right? To select the research paradigm, one should first form the research paradigm, which you discussed earlier, research objectives and hypotheses, which you discussed, shown earlier. Okay? And this gives the research an idea what is expected from the study and how to do it. What I would like you to do is formulate the research problem, the objectives and hypotheses, then obviously look at this and see whether it falls into the category of positivist or scientific or naturalistic or ethnographic or domain specific paradigm, and you have to follow the rules. There are certain specific rules. For example, if you are following, once you have formulated a research problem, come up with a research object, hypothesis, formulate your hypothesis, okay? Then you know that, and if it is a positive scientific kind of a study, then obviously only the observable facts will matter, okay? Nothing else. So this is how, I mean, at this stage, this research paradigm becomes more relevant. But before that, don't worry about it. You go ahead, formulate the research problem as we discussed, formulate the research objective hypothesis, and then see into which particular research paradigm it falls. If it is domain specific, for example, some kind of ethnographic study, then obviously you have to follow some certain additional rules. Next. Remember, we'll be discussing these things in more detail. Your objectives, okay, should follow certain characteristics. Objectives have to be very, very clear and unambiguous. We're going to talk about this in more detail later. Objective has to be complete. It cannot be kind of a half end to end. It has to be full, whatever it is. It has to be specific or descriptive. For example, in a descriptive kind of thing, when we may ask like, what would be the effects of an expansion, let's say, expansive fiscal policy on the economy or the demand? That's descriptive. But in a specific, you'll be asking what would be the increasing demand following a 10% reduction in indirect taxes or direct taxes. So objectives have to be either specific and descriptive, and you follow norms according to the type of objective that you have set in to start with. What's a correlation kind of a study? Well, if you are identifying main variables, just your research objective is to identify main variables, and you look at the extent of correlation. That's a correlation kind of study. And if you are looking at, you want to go one step ahead, not just the relationship or the extent of relationship, but the direction of the relationship, whether it's positive, negative, then of course you have to go into doing or making some kind of hypothesis testing. Next. And then of course, you have to be very, very careful about making your concepts and issues, your populations, your subject areas completely operational. You have to operationalize everything. So you have subject area and study population. For example, let's take two examples. First example is to find out the children living below the poverty line. Remember, that's a problem. Find out the children living below the poverty line. And the next one is to measure the effectiveness of a retraining program designed to help young people. Now here, there are two things. What is the concept that you're going to study? The population that you are going to focus. Okay? What's the concept here in the first case? The concept is poverty line. Concept is poverty line. So what would be issue? What constitutes poverty line? You have to be very, very specific about the definition. Okay? So the concept is poverty line, the issue is what constitutes poverty line. Then the population, the concerned population to be studied. What's the population here? Obviously children. And what is the issue? That is, you have to make sure whether you have the right kind of population. So who would be your children? Who would be your children? Between 10 to 15 or 5 to 15 or whatever. You have to be very, very specific. The second example, measure the effectiveness of a retraining program designed to help young people. The concept is effectiveness. So what is the issue? You have to define what constitutes effectiveness. Okay? what constitutes effectiveness. Say, if after the training program, if 10% of them get jobs, get they can start up their own business, that means the program is effective. Or you can set it at 20%, 5%, or 15%, whatever. But you have to be very, very careful. That's the issue. Concept is effectiveness. Issue is what constitutes effectiveness. What is the population here? The population is young. Remember, the effectiveness of a training program designed to help young people. The population is young. What is the issue here? Who would be the young people? 18 to 25 or 22 to 37, whatever. So that's something that you need to be very, very careful about. Next. Okay. And of course, these are things that you already know. Okay. So I'll not elaborate on this carefully. Remember, your research process needs to use procedures which are valid. What do you mean by validity? Roughly, correctness. The term validity, as you all know, probably refers to whether or not the test measures what it claims to measure. So any test with high validity, which means the items should be closely linked to the test basic focus, research basic focus. So basically, you have to ensure, and there are various statistical measures as well, you have to ensure that your research process is valid, passes the test of validity, and there are different types of validity, right? Content validity, phase validity, and things like that. Then it has to be reliable. That is simply your research process can be repeated and is expected to provide same or largely similar results. So you have a particular research process and you have taken a sample and come up with certain results. We expect that similar results will hold when you use the same process, same research process on another set of another sample, or maybe a sample in a different time period. Your research process needs to be unbiased, which means statistically unbiased. That is, the deviations from the mean on average in a large number. So you conduct a large number of experiments, and the average deviations from the average will cancel out. So you can have some trust on the average result that you are trying to propagate. Next, please. Remember, and this is the most important thing, right? Or one of the two most important things. Research objectives must be unambiguous. Any ambiguity in the objectives will certainly vitiate the process of inquiry, and the results will lack significance and may not be acceptable at all. It's because of this that the notions and the concepts to investigate into need to be made very, very specific, and measurable or observable equivalence or surrogates have to be developed. You can have conjectures, relationships, or more formally hypotheses. You can impute this hypothesis, but they need to be meaningful. That is to say, imputations should not be mechanical. This should be based on definite theories, existing relations. Otherwise, you will have spurious results. In order to avoid spurious results, your conjectures and relationships or hypotheses imputed need to be meaningful. Next. Next, please. Okay. So, where is it?
Should I go to the next slide, sir?
Yes, next slide, please. Next slide.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, your research to be accepted and to justify the expense of resources, that is time and money, has to be non-trivial. That is to say, previously we said unambiguous, now it's non-trivial. In fact, this is the basic thing that I started talking about in the very first place. Okay? It has to be non-trivial. That is to say, it should ensure accomplishing something new. Okay? So acquiring knowledge that was not there previously. It should generate value addition. Now, I'm not saying that it has to be, something very astronomical or earth-shaking something, but you need to know that if your research, if it's to be, accepted, and if it has to justify the expense of your own time and money, then it has to provide something new. generates some value addition. What is it? Next slide, please. Just let's look at this particular diagram. Okay, let's assume our existing boundary of knowledge, okay, in a particular discipline are represented by this polygon A, B, C, D, E. Okay, all knowledge acquired or gathered hereunto are inside this particular boundaries or on the boundaries. Okay? That is to say, the boundaries represent the frontiers of knowledge. Frontiers of knowledge. That is all that is known till now. That is all received doctrines, okay, till now. They're either inside or on the boundaries. And a typical learner would probably start somewhere inside the boundary, say at some point X, okay? And then initially what he does is he moves, okay? He learns in a broader, larger, general, range, okay? And as he specializes, he narrows down and ultimately concentrates on a particular segment. Let's say segment CD, or maybe a smaller segment within CD, okay? On the boundary. So he starts from inside the frontier of knowledge, inside the boundary, and then moves, okay, towards the boundary. He has to be on the, remember, he has to be on the boundary. Okay? Remember, he doesn't have to know everything, but he has to be on a certain point or a certain segment on the boundary in order to push the boundary out or in order to do something. That's what we would like to address next. Next slide, please. Okay. Look at this, okay. He may do one of the two things. One, he may investigate, hypothesize, and theoretically analyze, and may come out with new knowledge that pushes the boundary out to CM. See, he was, remember previously the polygon was A, B, C, D, and E. So he moved to the boundary, CD, some point in CD or some segment, and then his research, okay, his investigation, his hypothesis, his theoretical analysis, he did this, and he comes out with new knowledge that pushes the boundary out. So now the new frontier of knowledge encompasses point M. The body of knowledge has expanded, it has pushed the frontier out. This certainly adds to the body of existing knowledge. And this is essentially theoretical or analytical in nature, and certainly non-trivial research. So this is non-trivial, theoretical, or analytical research. But then again, next slide, please. Then again, he doesn't have to push the boundary out. Okay? What he can do is, okay, and in a substantial part of a social science research, okay, doing some things, what he may do is he instead may concentrate on a piece of existing knowledge that is on either on the boundary segment, let's say NK on BC, or maybe a relationship like PQ inside the boundary of knowledge. Right? So he takes an existing relationship or theory and he examines it with new observation or contemporary data or with new techniques and methods. And his or her investigation then may either establish this existing relationship or may at the most add some additional, insights or corollaries, or may refute it altogether. So what he's doing is he is re-examining the relationship. He takes a relationship either on the boundary or within, and re-examines it with new observations or contemporary data or new techniques and methods. Okay? And his or her investigation may either establish the existing relationship, may at the most add some additional insights or corollaries, or he or she may completely refute it, thereby altering the body of knowledge. Okay? So, for example, if this NK, you see this relationship doesn't hold anymore, then probably the shape of the polygon will differ. Okay? So remember, this research is usually dubbed empirical, but it is also non-trivial. Okay? So you do not have to necessarily push the boundary out. Okay? You may look at relationships within the boundary, re-examine them with new data, contemporary data, or new techniques and methods. Okay? And you say, well, this relationship holds, or you may add some additional insights or corollaries, right? Or you may refute it outright. Next please. Okay. So before we move to this, let me make this final comment over here. So the research and research process to be accepted, and certainly to survive for whatever time it can survive, that is until new knowledge arrives through research, it needs to be non-trivial. So any methodology of research should ensure that such non-triviality before any research is conducted. So remember, your research process or research results to be accepted and certainly to survive for whatever time it can survive, that is until new knowledge arrives, again through research. It has to be non-trivial. So until new knowledge arrives and either refutes it or alters it, still it needs to be non-trivial. So before we start any research process, you ensure that this non-triviality, either theoretical non-triviality or empirical non-triviality in your research. And finally, your research process needs to be innovative. It needs to be innovative because no textbook of methodology can guarantee that it will contain any and all the methods necessary to investigate any crime. I mean, we do not have an exhaustive in the collection of research methods which will meet needs of any research inquiry. So you have to be innovative. Okay? What we mean is this: you have to innovate. That is, you have to stand apart and think. Remember, I'm not saying not necessarily out of the box. We always say that we have to think out of the box. Not necessarily that you have to think out of the box, but you have to stand apart and think. Maybe you have to try to use the items in the box in different ways. So you do not necessarily need to move out of the box. Think out of the box. Use the items in the box in some different ways. Now, we'll end by giving you two illustrations. One, that asks an illustration that asks to determine an exact value, an exact answer, and another that asks to give an approximate answer. So there are two illustrations, two examples that we do, and here we'll see in both cases either you have to use the items in the box. You don't have to go out of the box, think out of the box, use the items in the box, then somewhat different way. And another case we see you probably have to think out of the box, but you have to innovate. Otherwise, research won't progress. Research certainly won't be non-trivial. Research won't add yield value addition. Next slide. Okay. Now, it's difficult to conduct this experiment here online, but let me just ask you this. If I ask you this question, find out, determine the exact average age of a group of people. So I don't know how many participants you are. Let's say you have 100 participants or 50 participants. Right? The problem is we have to find out the average age of the group of people, the exact average age. Okay? Not individually, exact average age. The condition is that you cannot ask any member, otherwise it's very simple. Ask their ages, give their ages, add them up, divided the number of group of group of persons in the group. Right? No, the condition is this: you cannot ask any member about his or her age. In any case, it's not very nice to ask anyone. I mean, I'm gender neutral. Right? Whether it's a male or a female person, it's not nice to ask anyone what his age or his or her age. So no questions, and you cannot ask any questions. Like, for example, well, I'm not asking you about your age, or you don't have to give your age, but what is the year of your passing school? No, you can't do that. You have to get some idea, or year of marriage, or something like that. And no guesswork from appearance will do, because we want an exact average age. No guesswork will, from appearance will do. So what do we do? How do you go about it? Okay. Well, in an offline mode, I would have probably conducted the experiment in a much better manner, but we can't do it. So let me do this. Anybody has any clue? Yes, participants? All right. What we do is let's say we have a 3% in a group, okay? Just 3 persons, okay? And each person is asked to write a number which equals his or her exact age plus any random number. So we ask him or her, okay, that you write a number which equals your exact age plus any random number, very random. And then pass this paper on to the next person. And the next person will add a total, which is the sum of his or her exact age and a random number. And then pass it to the next person, and the process will accumulate. Process will accumulate. Okay. But remember, he or she must know the random number that is adding to his or her exact age. Why do we do this? I mean, let me look at it. Next, please. Next, please. Next slide. Yeah. So there are 3 persons, I said. So the first person writes 57. First person. So this is the sum of his or her exact age plus a random number that he or she knows of. Then he passes this piece of paper to the other person, and the other person writes 28. So 57 plus 28, that's 85. Then he passes the paper to the next person, and the next person adds 45, and the total is 130. What do we do now? What do we do now? What we do is, I'm sure most of you have already, got an idea what you're trying to do. Okay? Now, the persons are now really asked to deduct the respective number. So, the third person now, who has the paper now has a total of 130, he passes it back to person 1, or he can do it himself as well. The person 1 is asked to subtract, okay, deduct the random number. We don't know what is random number. So he deducts 130, and the number now total now becomes 101. He passes on to the next person. Person 2 deducts his random number, his or her random number. Total is 98. And the third person does the same, and the total is now 75. The exact average age of the group. Remember, I'm saying exact average age of the group is now 75 divided by the number of persons in the group, which is 3, which is 25. Does it make any sense? Did you follow what we're trying to do? Next slide, please. Next slide, please. What has happened is this is the solution. The first person wrote 57. His or her exact age is 28. He added a random number of 29. We don't know. I mean, we have only seen the first part. Okay? Second person, exact age is 25. Added a random number 3. That's 28. Third person, the exact age is 23. Added a random number 23. That's 45. That was the total was 130. If you would have known the exact ages, it would be 75. What you have done is you have asked, restarted the paper. The first person was asked to deduct his random number. That was 29. So we have 101. The second person was asked to deduct his random number 3. So that's 98. Third person was asked to deduct the random number. So we have 75. So that's the total of the exact ages divided by 3. That's 25. What are you doing here? See, remember, our question is, can you go back? Can you go back? Yes, one step back. Yes, our question was exact average age of a group of people. What's the question? Average age. Concentrate on average. Average is what? Total divided by the number of persons. We know the number of persons in the group, which is 3, which is in the denominator. So we need the numerator. Numerator would be the sum of total ages, aggregate total ages. So we don't need individual ages. So somehow we have to get the total, and this is one way to get the total. Please, next slide, guys. Next slide. Yeah. What we have done is we have asked them to add a random number. We might have done the same thing by asking them to deduct a random number. Then we, on the second phase, we have asked them to add back the random number. We would have gotten the same thing. You could have done with multiplication or division or any other complicated manner. The point is, you have, once you have a problem, okay, you have, remember, we are not using anything which is new. The items are all in the box. Addition, division, multiplication, whatever, or any complicated algebraic formulation. Okay? The point is, you have to use the items in a somewhat different manner. What we have done is here, we know that we have to find the averages. What is averages? Total divided by the number of persons. We know the number of persons. We know the denominator. What we need to know is the numerator. So that's a sum. We don't need the individualism. We don't need 28, 25, 20. We don't need to know that. In fact, could you please go back to the previous slide? Could you please go back to the previous slide? Yes. See, this is a solution. We don't know the individual ages. That's the first number. The first person wrote. That's the second. That's the third. We ask them to deduct the random numbers. So we have 75. We don't know. Up until here, we don't know the exact ages. We haven't asked anything. We haven't guessed from their appearances. We haven't asked anything about their year of graduation, things like that. Our main question, remember, is finding out the average, exact average. And average is total divided by, we know the denominator, we have to find out the numerator, which is the aggregate sum of actual ages. And this is one way to find that. Asking you to add a random number, you can ask them to deduct a random number, then add back, okay? Or multiply, divide, or divide, multiply, or form some algebraic formulation. So all you have to do, remember here, we are, this illustration ascertains the exact age, okay? Exact age, and all that we have done, we haven't, gone out of the box. We have use the items in the box in a somewhat different manner. All right. Next slide, please. Next. Okay. The next illustration, as I said, would be where we'd like to know. The question would be to ask an approximate answer. Approximate answer. And here we'll see how we go about doing that. Probably we have to think out of the box, go out of the box. And at this point, what we do, of course, is a descriptive kind of a thing. Okay? We recount, and I'll tell you about an anecdote, which has been doing its rounds over a long period of time in the halls and corridors of an esteemed institution. I'm not going to name it. At the risk of oversimplification, misspecification, or outright omission, and probably some exaggeration, it goes as follows. Right after independence, as we know, and our painful partition of our country, a group of people. Am I audible? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yes, we are going to discuss the anecdote. Okay, so that's that. We don't have any other slide. Okay, so right after independence and our partition, okay, which is a very painful partition of a country, a group of people living in the western part of Punjab, which is part of the newly formed or the newly created country, they faced riots. So they fled their land and took shelter in an old fort in Delhi. Okay. As a matter of fact, they were so terrified that they shut themselves in a corner of the fort. They shut themselves in a corner of the fort and will not let anyone else come inside their corner of the fort. This was an enclosure which could be shut, and they shut themselves and they would not let anyone come inside this particular corner of the fort. The government, the newly formed government, was very, very concerned. Remember, it's a true story. Okay, it engaged. The government was concerned how they lived, people how they live, okay? And they are not letting anyone in, despite the government's pleading, all kinds of pleading. So the government engaged a caterer who would supply them food through a very narrow opening. There was a very narrow opening. The caterer was not allowed inside either. Remember, the caterer was not allowed inside. Now it was going on. So the caterer was, delivering food. Very soon, the government official involved in overseeing the arrangement, the catering arrangement, became doubtful and suspicious about the periodic bill being submitted by the caterer. They thought, well, the bill was too much. He suspected the bill to be inflated. Okay? He said he thought that there could not be so many heads inside the compound. It's a small part, it's a small corner, and there it cannot just accommodate so many heads. Okay? So he thought the caterer was inflating the bill. So he informed his superiors. On being informed, his superiors engaged researchers. Now comes the role of researchers. They engaged researchers who were asked to give an estimate of the number of likely inmates. Number of likely inmates, right, in the corner. What's the condition? The researchers cannot, should not, will not get into the compound. So without getting into the compound, they have to give the government an idea about the likely number of inmates in the compound. So here we have a research question for which there is no specific textbook method. So what do you do? Okay. What do? You have to innovate. You have to come up with something. And so here we really need to think out of the box for our known textbook of research methodology. And you have to improvise an appropriate method. Remember, appropriate, we have talked about appropriateness. You have to improvise an appropriate method. So after a lot of brainstorming and deliberation, researchers came up with an idea. I remember there was this team of researchers. There were many different, they came from many different fields. Right? They surveyed, and this is the idea. Okay? This is the innovation that carried out. They surveyed the local nearby groceries, which the caterer would normally buy things from. They specifically asked the grocers if there is any increase in the purchase of salt. Once again, whether there is any appreciable increase in the purchase of salt in the last few days, and if so, how much? And the grocers replied in the affirmative, gave them the necessary data. The grocer said, yes, there's been an appreciable increase.
Hello, sir, are you there?
Sound has gone, sir.
Yes, I think sir got muted.
Sound has gone.
No, I think this connection. Sir,
Okay.
we urge the participants to please wait. I think our speaker is having some kind of a technical problem.
Sir got disconnected. So, Tufan, sir,
Yeah,
wait, I just talked to him.
yes, please do.
In the meanwhile, I want to say just, oh, sir has joined. Yeah. Sir, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yeah,
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. You are
Yes,
audible.
sir, you're audible.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what happened here. I'm very sorry. I don't know what point I was there. Okay.
No problem, sir.
Can you?
Yes, sir. You were telling us that the researchers went to the groceries
Yes,
nearby,
all right. Okay.
asked them about the purchase of salt,
Right.
and that was
Absolutely.
the point where we left.
Okay. So after, I mean, the researchers did a lot of brainstorming and deliberation. Am I audible now? Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, sir. You are
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay. So the researchers did a lot of brainstorming and they came up upon this particular idea. See, what they did is they surveyed the local grocers, the groceries which this particular caterer would normally buy things from. and they specifically asked if there is any appreciable increase in the purchase of salt in the last few days, okay? In the last few days, and if so, how much? And they were very delighted, and the grocers replied in the affirmative, yes, there's been an appreciable increase in the purchase of salt, and they gave the necessary idea how much was increase in the purchase of salt. Now, we all know the human body usually can absorb only a certain percentage, average amount of salt per day. As a matter of fact, my knowledge goes is all right. It's just a teaspoonful of salt that normal human body can absorb. Okay? So the extra total amount of salt used by the caterer per day divided by this average amount per person per day would readily give the researchers a likely figure of AIDS. So the total amount, that extra amount that has been bought, divided by the average amount of salt which a normal human person can body can absorb. Okay, so we divide one by the other, and you get the likely figure of hits inside the compound for whom the food is being delivered. Well, a lot of statistical computations and tests followed, and a likely figure and a range with appropriate statistical significance were arrived at. To cut the story short, okay, this figure was checked later against the actual hits when the inmates came out later, and they were very, very similar. This research, remember, was certainly innovative. Okay? As a matter of fact, as I was mentioning, despite our knowledge of existing methodologies, many a time we need to be this innovative in order to accomplish our objective. So our first problem, first last question, we asked what would be the exact value, And remember, we didn't have to go out of the box. We just used the items in the box in a different manner. We asked what would be, but our question was, what is the average age? And the average
So we have lost you again.
I think there's a network flickering there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yes, yes. So, well, I don't know at what point I left you again. Okay. So the trick was to find out the extra amount of the additional amount of salt, okay, purchased by this caterer. Okay. This is the additional amount of salt, okay, and we divided the statisticians divided it by the average amount of salt, which is usually 1 teaspoon, okay, that the human body can, a normal human body can absorb in a particular day. So that total divided by this would give the likely number of hits within that particular compound. And as a matter of fact, I mean, this was the answer. There were a lot of statistical computations and tests, but this basically is very simple, but it's basically this is what gave the answer. And this figure was later checked later when the issue was solved and the inmates came out and the heads were tallied, and we found that this is the I mean the statisticians approximate value was certainly within the appreciable statistically significant range. So these two illustrations tell you that you have to be innovative in order that your research adds value. There is value addition. There's non-triviality. You have to be innovative. You have to innovate. You have to not necessarily always think out of the box. You have to know how to use the items so that they can be
So we lost you again.
Yes, I think Tufan sir, please we should wait. Actually,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
and in the meanwhile, I want to say that in the next week there will be the exam, and all the things will be give everything about the examination schedule and the date timing will be this information will be disclosed by Professor Dr. Mohua Chakraborty madam. That is there.
No, sir has just left.
Yes. Yes.
He has joined again.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm sorry
We
about.
can hear you, sir. Yeah.
Yes,
Yes, sir, you're audible again.
yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, have you heard about the solution? I don't know. Did you hear about the solution? Am I audible now?
Yes, sir,
Yes,
absolutely.
sir. We heard your solution. Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
okay. So that's it. I mean, I just I don't want to go any further because there is this. I don't know why there is this connectivity issue. But anyway, if you have any questions or anything, I can go ahead
Sir,
and.
I will ask you the first question if you don't mind. Good evening, sir.
Sure.
Thank you for a very interesting talk.
Hmm.
My question is very simple, but I have not been able to find an answer myself. Though I, of course, do not do any active research.
Hmm.
Do you think, sir, that research pertaining to social problems and marketing research, finding the size of a market, these things are more difficult than research which is more scientific and perhaps lab based? That was my question.
Certainly. Okay, because the lab-based research, right, or the research that is based on certain exact formulas, exact theories, right, that would give you results which can be tested, which can be validated, okay, much more often than results in a social kind of a study. Let's say the market share held by a particular company. Now, you have, you have to do a sample study, and sample doesn't have, approximate the entire population. So there will be always errors, statistical errors. And the other thing is this sample would change from one time to another. So the results obviously will not be valid for a long period of time. So I would certainly say research, scientific research, a positivist kind of research uh, gives you results which can be trusted, which will hold over a longer period of time than social research, economic research, or statistical research, or some kind of management research, social science research. I mean, that's always it's a nature. It's a research paradigm. It's a domain specific paradigm that we're talking about, and you have to follow the particular norms. To what extent you can convert them into policy interventions, that depends on you. On exact sciences research conducted in physics or some such exact sciences, the results obviously will give you policies, exact policies. But for research and research results carried out in social science, uh, the policy interventions would be as good as the research or research results. Yes.
Thank you very much, sir.
I'm sorry about the connectivity issue, okay? And anyway, I believe that's the time that we have. Once
No
again,
problem, sir. Thank you very much,
thank you.
sir, for your outstanding and insightful lecture. Uh, and I will request the participants to, if you have any questions, so you can directly ask, sir. And thank you from our side that you have given us so your precious time to us.
I appreciate you inviting me to this particular talk. I wish you the very best. Okay? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Yeah, Sandeep Kumar sir. Yeah, thank you. Messages are there. Sandeep Kumar sir is saying. Shoikot sir is saying thank you. Okay. Shrestha Sadhu, Professor Shrestha Sadhu is saying thank you.
Thank you.
Lots of thank you messages are there from the faculties. So we hope we will get more sessions from you in future also. Sir.
I'll certainly try. I mean, this we just. I mean, in the very beginning, you said we will touch upon only one particular aspect, just formulating and negotiating research problem. I mean, there are other stages of the research process, okay, which we haven't touched. Okay? Planning how, doing it, actually doing it. Okay, so there are different kind of phases. Okay, and there are plenty of examples that we can bring in. Okay? So thank you. That's probably for some time in the future. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Good night, sir. And also, last but not the least, that we want to salute all the participants for your support, your patience, your enthusiasm, and your cooperation throughout the entire FDP to make our FDP successful. Thank you, all the participants. Thank you. Good night to everyone.
Thanks to you for leading the 5 days program, all of you. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. And we are thankful, and also actually Mahua madam.
Thank you. Do I have your permission to leave now?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I wish you the very best.
Yes.